Hi, welcome to another Sandwich Chamber Spotlight. I am Jay Pateakos, Executive Director of the Sandwich Chamber of Commerce, and today we are here in the place that you've all heard about, but we're going to learn more about today. We're here with Tom Keys, President of the North Atlantic Archaeological Collaborative here on Water Street. How you doing, Mr. Keys?
Thanks for having me, Jay.
Thanks for having us. We want to learn a little bit more about the history of this site. I know there's some people that have heard the story of what happened and your dig and stuff, but I'd like you to start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about, purchasing this house and finding the gem you found in the backyard.
Yeah, I'll give you the nickel tour. We were looking at this property back in 2010. It was listed as an 1817 colonial. Well, eventually the price was right, and no one lived in it 15 years. It was a disaster. My wife and I said, okay, we'll pop on it. And so we purchased the property and we started a year-long rehab. During rehab, we took down one of the upstairs ceilings and we found hand-hewn beams. And they weren't hand-cutting beams in 1817. They had enough machinery at that time. Well, we call in a local archaeologist. His name's David Wheelock. David comes over, and within a half hour, we're sitting in the attic, and he says, it's a good thing you're sitting, because at this point, I would bet the farm this house is pre-1650.
Unbelievable.
Well, when you're doing a rehab of a 200-year-old house, that all the walls had paint peeling in, the floors were, it was non-livable. And then you realize that your 200-year-old house is closer to 400 years old. I had some explaining to do with my wife. I asked Mr. Wheelock to go explain it to her, and he quickly bowed out of it. But we're not complaining. So we went forward, and the inside of the house is fantastic. We uncovered a lot of the 17th century and 18th century woodwork that had been basically walled up, walls within walls. And air gaps. We've now removed those, and we've exposed the gun stock posts and all the paneling, and it's a charming house. It's great to raise my two girls in there, and it's been an experience. But that wasn't it.
That's only the beginning.
That's only the beginning. So the house itself has been an experience. We've been in it now since we moved in January 2012, but it's a constant process. Yeah. And so as we're moving forward, David Wheelock had brought in another archaeologist, and they said, can we do some material culture out in front of the house? So they drop in a couple of test holes, and they're finding out that the material culture, which is, nails, pennies, anything that would happen in a yard at that period, was 1800 till today. So they came back in, they said, there's something wrong. This house was moved here. I'm like, oh boy, where did it come from? So luckily it was end of winter, and they could see through the grassy marsh over here. And they said, who owns that grassy knoll over by the pond? He said, well, we do. Can we throw in a test hole? And a test hole has now turned into something the size of an Olympic swimming pool. And the first thing they found was this. They dug a hole, and this comes in, an artifact, which is an arrow point. You can hold, that's getting hot in the sun, be careful. But it's still as sharp as the day it was napped. And that's probably somewhere 600-900 years old. This is a fantastic piece. Don't worry about dropping it. Can't break it. It's a rock. And once they found that, they started taking it further, doing another test hole and another test hole. And they find out that, the house was probably here. Top of a knoll, overlooking at that time, pre-1650, this was just a river. It wasn't even a pond yet from the grist mill.
Yep.
Would have been a quintessential 17th century place to put a first period house. And then they thought we were done. Okay, we see activity, and we stopped. And this is where, life's a funny thing. Sometimes it throws you a curveball, sometimes it just throws you the perfect pitch. They backfilled the site. There were just test holes, and it was over. My niece, Olivia, she was in the 7th grade at the time, says, hey, Uncle Tom, do you mind if my class comes over and we do a little field trip for the science class here in Sandwich? So I call up the archaeologist and say, hey guys, can you please come back, open up one hole, we'll have a class, a little presentation. Right now it's just a grassy field behind us. So in the morning they came over and they opened up a very small hole, and they came right down on top of the hearth, the bricks, in situ, with mortar and everything. We hadn't seen it yet, we missed it. And they go, uh-oh. And because my niece asked for a field trip,
that's amazing.
This, which was a buildable 1.5 acre lot, is now, my wife and I, we've set it aside in perpetuity to the North Atlantic, which is a foundation. for education. And we've had endless amount of student participation out here, schools up in Boston, all over, coming part of their STEM program to do archaeology.
That's amazing.
So that is the nickel tour. There's so much more to it.
What else have you found? Well, obviously you've done digging in stages over here. What else have you found?
Different levels show different things. Up in this front area is a lot of the native artifacts. Mm-hmm. Down the other side is more of what we would call later, which is more like the 1670s. And so for 3 years we were digging here thinking around 1645, 1650. Then last year in November, we had the Windsor School for Girls down. They begged us to stay open in early November. We tried to close the site because it's getting a little cold and the ground's getting hard. And we started doing a little test hole over here with the girls, and they found a rock formation. We said, "Uh-oh, that's not natural."
Yeah.
So we pull them out. We excavate further, and we find that it continues and continues. We sent pictures down to the Arc Review team down at Coastal Carolina and Mount Vernon. And they said, "You got to revise your dates. You just found an older house in front of what you've been digging on for 3 years." So we now have a root cellar here that we haven't excavated fully down. We now see the rubble from when they filled it in to make a pony pasture out of this area. And so what's in the bottom? We don't know. There could be a lot in the bottom. But we stopped counting at 9,000 artifacts last year. They're all bagged and tagged and being processed through the lab. Katie Wiggins is our staff archaeologist also, and she's doing a fantastic job of processing. But the things we're finding are fantastic. Here's one that was found last year, which is simply amazing. A spoon. We have regular spoons from the late 17th century and our early 18th century. But here's one which is completely different. This is called a seal top spoon, and you can see the bowl is more like fig-shaped, and the top is a flat. Basically, it was a seal, because in the early 1600s, people would travel with their spoon, and the top was a seal for doing letters, dual focus. It's kind of like a
multi-use,
a multitask tool, right? But this is something that the Pilgrims would have used. This this probably predates 1620.
Wow,
it's a fantastic find.
Amazing.
Some of the more interesting pieces, and I've just brought a very small grouping, is we have, this here is flint from a musket, probably a pistol. This is a very interesting piece. It's whole. You can hold that. It's an instrument. It's called a juice harp.
Juice harp.
That boing boing sound, you know. That is a juice in your mouth, and it's complete. Again, these are all from the 1600s until you get into the native artifacts, which are incredibly old. This here, excuse the blue dot, that's the stickum to hold it there. These are getting hot. This here would have been whole, looked like a whale tail. It would continue about this big. Mm-hmm. And this was lashed to a throwing stick. If you want to hold it, you can, but it is getting crazy hot from the sun. And the throwing stick is how you propelled a spear further, kind of like those whippets at the beach from dogs. It's kind of the same thing, and that was lashed to it. And this dates this rock that's been fashioned somewhere between 3,000 and 9,000 years old. And that was used to throw a spear into what would have been a woolly mammoth.
Wow.
Right back there. So we've got things going pretty far back. It's not just a first period colonial site, but it's also prehistoric.
Is that like a plate or?
Yeah, this was a piece that came out in the hole. We have a picture of it in the ground still. But this here is a spectacular piece of pottery that over time, things in the ground will get broken up. It'll be fragmented because of the frost heaves. And you'll have frost down about a good foot or so. So anything up a little higher can get broken up. Here's a nice little piece. This here is a button, and it's got a G on it. First, we didn't know whose property this was, and it took us over a year to figure out that this was Thomas Toby's original site. Wow. Nobody knew where Thomas Toby originated. And so that's G for Gershom, one of his sons. And we have another one here, an N, for one of his other sons. This is a fantastic piece. I'll keep this wrapped up. I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera, but it's a smoking pipe.
It's got a face on it.
It's got a face on it. I don't know if you can hold that for the camera. Don't drop that. There's only been a few of those ever found.
Wow.
That is called a Sir Walter Raleigh effigy pipe.
You got the nose, you got the eyes, you've got the mouth impressions.
Still blackened on the top from smoking. And in the 17th century, everybody smoked tobacco.
Yeah.
It wasn't, just
There wasn't a Surgeon General back then.
but it was also considered healthy.
Yeah.
They actually they called it drinking smoke because if you were living in a house where you had a fire going 24 hours a day, you were breathing in smoke, and people had phlegm and all kinds of nastiness going on in their lives. This was a dry smoke, and they called it drinking smoke.
So dry you out.
Sir Walter Raleigh, the effigy pipe, it's a great fable. The fable was that at one point he fell off a boat and was eaten by an alligator, but that he was so tobacco juicy from the smoking that it spat him on the shore, and he stood up and said, "Salvation from the weed." And that's part of how they sold it over in Europe when he brought tobacco over there. At that point, it was just the Native Americans were smoking tobacco, and then it came back over. We have some fantastic pieces like this here. This is a pure silver brooch. It's called a ring brooch that actually articulates.
Wow, so what's the point in it moving?
So what you do is you would have that brooch and you would bring two pieces of like a shawl in between it, and the pin would fall back on it to hold it together. And it's very decorative, it's incised. That is quite early.
That's really neat. That looks like an oarlock or something.
It's probably a spur or back of a shoe. Thomas Toby did have.
Wasn't even close.
Archaeology is a funny thing. We always call it, it's a series of wrong. Guessing will get you humbled real quick.
Yeah.
Here we are. We didn't know how old the house was. We still, after 4 years, don't know how old this house is. We're guessing.
The digging continues.
The digging continues. My house that we're in after the restoration, we know it's mid-century. Is it 1640, 1645, 1650?
Now, what is your hope with the North Atlantic in the end? I mean, you formed this foundation. You're a busy guy already, but you're doing this on the side. I mean, what is your hope for this, for the future? I know you've got classes that are coming in, kids are getting educated, which is important because I think in archaeology, kids seem to just think of, past stuff and it's good that you've got recent situations where kids can actually touch and look at.
And really that's what it comes down to. It's education. Artifacts are great, but we say once it comes out of the ground, you can't put it back. It's digging, finding out where it is, why it is, how it is, what's the material content around it that helps tell the story. There's a gentleman that's on our archaeology review team down in Coastal Carolina Research, Eric Dietz, and he wrote the primer for what we're doing. And he says that, and I'll just loosely throw this out there, the Northeast suffers from an embarrassment of riches on the amount of documentation for the first 100 years of colonization. But by contrast, there's very little archaeology to support it. We have the documents, but we cannot support it through archaeology because there isn't a lot up here. Yeah. People don't realize we're still living on top of it. And as houses come up and come down and get burnt, as roads come in and go out, if you looked at Sandwich in the 1600s, and then you look at Sandwich today, you wouldn't recognize it. The roads have been moved, everything's been changed. It doesn't look the same, and a lot's been decimated. You go over to the first town over in Plymouth, and in the 60s, they knocked down most of the 17th century structures. There's only a couple left, maybe two, in the entire town of Plymouth. Downtown Sandwich has been preserved. It's only because it's passed around by 6A cutting across, and the highway bypassing. It's basically left it, I'm not going to say untouched, but there are a lot of opportunities in this area. And our hope with what we're doing is to bring archaeology back to the masses. Archaeology, typically, if you read the reports, they're not read as a story. Mm-hmm. They're read very sterile. It's archaeology for archaeologists. Yeah. We want to bring it back to the children. And if you're out here, and I'd like to invite you out someday to observe, when the kids are in the hole through this 2-hour experience, they don't want to leave. They all do find something on what's classified one of the rarest sites in the nation. So it's a great opportunity for them to help us learn more from the site. It's a great opportunity for them to experience that archaeology and science can be fun and interesting.
Yeah, firsthand.
And firsthand. So the goal is to educate. That's the number one goal, which is why we've set this parcel aside in perpetuity for educational purposes. We could be digging out here for 20 years easily. It's an acre and a half. There's outbuildings we've identified all over. It's an intact home site. And the way it was explained to me is archaeology in this area is typically done because someone had to build something. Mm-hmm. And for instance, I'll use the one up in Marshfield. They were going to extend the airport. out by the marsh.
Right.
And to extend it, they came across a first period home. And so they stopped and they brought in one of the universities and the students, and they dug for just a period of a couple of months. Once they dug and understood and found out, then they bulldozed it and put in the airport strip. It's gone. So it's great to learn from it, but it's a very small window.
Right.
Here we are, we've had multiple archaeologists out here for 4 years. We still have no idea how old the building is. There's so much to learn. Archaeology should not be we're gonna take a 2-week window and dig over there and see what we can find. That's why this is such a rare site, because it's being set aside in perpetuity, and there isn't another one out there that we're aware of.
So give us a snapshot for the next year. What is your hope for the next year?
Yeah, our plan for this year, 2015, is we're now opening up the site to the public. It's all been very private. It is on private property, and we're now going to open it up so that adults can have an opportunity. I just did a presentation to the Cape Cod Technology Council, and so I asked after we got to the end that we were thinking of opening up field trips for adults. I said, anybody want to come? And we had about 60 people in the room raise their hand. And I said, So now I'm working with the Cape Cod STEM Network, Jill Newmeyer, as well as I've been talking to the former president of Cape Cod Community College, Kathy Schatzberg, and she's working with me to help put this new program together. And in August, which is what, tomorrow?
Yep.
We're going to have programming for adults to come out. We need to have at least 13 people, and it's going to be about $32. Now, we keep it $16 for students for obvious reasons. We try to keep it as low as possible, but I still have to pay these archaeologists.
Yeah.
They got to eat. So it's going to be $32 a person. It's a 2-hour experience. If you go to naarchaeology.org, our web blogger is building it as we speak. So if you don't see the link there to sign up, please just send a note on the contact page, say, I'm interested in coming. And as long as we can get between 13 and 20, we can't do more than 20, you'll be working with a team of archaeologists on one of the rarest sites in the nation, and guarantee you will uncover artifacts like this, like you're seeing. Ironware, native points, fantastic stuff, beautiful wares that come out of the ground all the time. This here is a little flake that's just spectacular.
Wow.
That's German. This is a great site, and our goal is to open it up for adults and then see where that's going to take us. Over the wintertime, we do a lot of programming where we'll come out like we're doing here, but I'll do a full PowerPoint presentation. I'll do it at the schools, I'll do it at Council on Aging, I'll do it anywhere to help promote this site.
And you guys are on Facebook too, so.
We are on Facebook. Right now, I think if you go to naarchaeology.org, it'll probably zip you right to the Facebook,
yep.
But maybe not, because right now, just this morning, I was working with our web blogger, and
okay.
the site might be live, and if there's anything missing on a page, it'll take you to our Facebook, and you'll see all the updates. There's a lot of our updates on our Facebook page that we're now bringing back into the website. Either way, you'll get to us.
Awesome. Well, any final thoughts before we go today? Anything else you want people to know about the site?
It is a private site, so please don't come knocking on my door at 22 Water Street, because we do live there. Luckily, my house is on an adjacent 1 acre. This is an acre and a half. Well, I'm working with town engineering to put in a separate pathway right off the road.
That'll help.
There will be no parking, so if you want to come, you have to park at the Wing School, which is a big open parking lot. It works out great. And don't just do that. Become a member of the North Atlantic. naarchaeology.org. We're putting membership together. We're creating what's called Young Archaeologists of America, which will be another fun one based out of a group that did it over in England. And archaeology is fun. Yeah, you have to be a science nerd, but that's all right.
Yeah, but you're a fun guy. You're making it fun.
It is fun. I guarantee you come out here, it'll be an experience you can't get anywhere else.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Tom. This is another Sandwich Chamber Spotlight. We're at the location of the North Atlantic Archaeological Collaborative here with Mr. Keys.